Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and I'm a community assistant at Manzanita. And living in a freshman year dorm, one of the big things I care about is sexual health and knowing that my residents understand sexual health and sexually transmitted diseases. So today I'll be talking about HIV transmission and prevention. Since this is a sensitive topic, if at any time you feel the need to take a break or leave the room for a little bit, that is totally okay. Go ahead and take a break and then jump back in whenever you're ready. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me. That's fine with me. Just I care about you guys getting your questions answered. So however you want to ask, go ahead. So before we jump into this presentation, I'd like to emphasize that there is no cure for HIV and AIDS, but it is completely preventable. So since there's no cure, we need to concentrate on preventing transmission. So there's two things to think about for transmitting this disease, and it's what fluids can transmit the disease and through what doors. So I'll talk about the doors in a few minutes, but first we'll talk about the fluids. So can anyone guess what fluids might contain HIV virus particles? So the first one would be blood. The second one is vaginal secretion. Third one, semen. Fourth one, pre-ejaculate, and then breast milk. If you guys aren't familiar with pre-ejaculate, it is basically during sexual intercourse, there is fluid or liquid seeping out of the tip of the penis, and this can contain HIV virus particles. I'd like to emphasize that tears, sweat, saliva are not on this list because they do not contain HIV. They don't have any immune cells, and so because of that, they cannot transmit the disease. Basically, these fluids would have to get into the body they would have to get to the body of a non-infected person from an infected person. And so that leads to the question, well, how can they get through to the non-infected person? And we call these through doors, and there are 4 doors that could give like a gateway into another person's body. Can anyone guess what any of these 4 are? So the first one would be the anus, second one, vagina, third one would be through any open wounds on the body, and then the fourth one is tip of the penis. Open wounds is basically just anywhere on your body where you have an open wound, where blood is present, anything like that. It has to be through both the non-infected person and the infected person. Both have to have open wounds for the possible transfer of blood to happen, and that is how it could be transmitted. So that leads us into the 3 ways that HIV can be transmitted. The first one would be through sexual intercourse, unprotected, and let's talk about why. So when we're thinking about ways of HIV being transmitted, we need to think about what fluids are we talking about that could be transmitted and through what doors. So for sexual intercourse, unprotected, we have semen, pre-ejaculate, and vaginal secretion. And through what doors could this possibly get through? That would be the vagina, tip of the penis, and possibly anus. So because there is both fluids present and a door, you don't need all 3, and you don't need 2 doors, or you don't need 3 doors, but just knowing that there is at least 1 fluid and at least 1 door, it could potentially be transmitted through sexual intercourse. The second one would be through blood-to-blood mixing, and I briefly mentioned this earlier, through open wounds. If someone who is HIV positive has an open wound that is bleeding, and somehow the blood gets mixed with the blood of a non-infected person through another open wound on their body, that could potentially cause the transmission of HIV particles. The third way is mother-to-child transmission. This could be through childbirth. During childbirth, there's a lot of microabrasions on the child's body. This could cause the mixing of blood to occur. And also with breastfeeding, since when they're breastfeeding, they're teething, and when they're teething, there could be open wounds on their mouth, so that could cause the mixing of blood to breast milk through open wounds and stuff. And remember that breast milk is one of the fluids that could cause the transfer of HIV. So I'm gonna quickly review what we just talked about. So I have everything written here. So we're just gonna quickly go over it again. The 5 fluids and the 4 doors. So for the 5 fluids, that's blood, vaginal secretion, semen, pre-ejaculate, and breast milk. Remember that tears, sweat, and saliva do not contain HIV. There's no immune cells, so there's no way to transmit the disease. The 4 doors are the anus, vagina, open wounds, and penis. And those are the 4 ways, the 4 doors that could potentially give gateway for the fluids to get through and transmit the disease. And then what we just talked about, the last part, which is the 3 ways in which it can be transmitted through like what actions. That would be, the first one is sexual intercourse, unprotected. The second one is blood to blood mixing, and the third one is from mother to child. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Thank you so much for asking questions and being part and participating in the presentation. I appreciate it a lot. If you have any questions on anything, please feel free to email me. I'll put my email at the bottom or at the end of this, and feel free to email me on any questions you have about this presentation, or if you have any other questions that come up after this, please feel free to email me. Thank you so much for listening.